Wow, things are about to change in crypto. 6 of the most prominent executives in all of crypto just testified in front of Congress. This is big. Normally testimonies like this make you lose faith in humanity a bit, but let me tell you, I was pleasantly surprised. I watched through this nearly 5-hour testimony and have pulled clips that I find to be the most intriguing. And this is an important video to watch because the ideas discussed today will help dictate the future of crypto and crypto laws for decades to come. The first thing to take note of is the 4-pillar framework that the Coinbase CFO suggested for increased regulations of crypto.
First, we believe the government should recognize digital assets under a new, comprehensive framework that recognizes the unique technological and innovations underpinning digital assets.
Basically, we shouldn't use old rules to govern new technology.
Second, the responsibility for this new framework should be assigned to a single federal regulator.
This will help bring clarity of rules and prevent the issue of, well, mom said I could do it, but dad said no. This is a big problem that we've seen in the past with crypto, especially with a product like Coinbase's Earn platform that was shut down due to lack of transparency and conflicting opinions of government agencies.
Third, this new framework should have 3 goals to ensure holders of digital assets are empowered and protected. A, we believe in enhanced transparency through robust and appropriate disclosure requirements. B, we want to protect against fraud and market manipulation. And C, we want to promote efficiency and strengthen our market resiliency.
Transparency, fraud protection, and to promote efficiency. This seems reasonable enough. Help protect people, but don't hold them back.
Our 4th and final pillar is to ensure that regulatory solutions promote interoperability and fair competition.
I believe this is extremely important, and this concern was highlighted a few times in this session. There's a big concern that the U.S. will simply be too strict, and this will have severe negative effects of the United States' competitiveness in the field of crypto. If this is truly the technology of the future, the U.S. needs to be forward-thinking in order to remain on the cutting edge. The world is changing, and it's easier than ever for an individual or a company to move to another country who simply has more favorable rules. Now, right out of the gate, Maxine Walters came swinging for Chad Castorilla about Paxos' partnership with Facebook. They referenced how the early stablecoin project Libra was put on hold after a previous committee had raised concerns with it undermining the separation between banking and commerce.
What is stopping Facebook from the future allowing its nearly 3 billion monthly active users to make payments and save funds with the Pax dollar or other previously issued stablecoin through a Nova wallet? If this were allowed at such a scale, how would this not undermine the U.S. dollar and the world's reserve currency?
Cascarilla's response then focused on the nature of the relationship between Novi, which is Facebook's new wallet product, and Paxos, and how Novi is simply just another customer of Paxos, which was selected because of how well Paxos is regulated. Walters then went on to ask how long it would be before Novi comes out of its pilot phase and opens up to the more than 3 billion users on Facebook for their new financial services platform. Cascarilla then pointed out that it would be best to ask Novi directly about concerns over its pilot program. And this is an interesting situation to ponder. Facebook's massive reach of 3 billion could literally disrupt currencies across the world, not just the US. If all 3 billion users began using a unified currency, we don't even know what would happen in this case. And is this something that we want a company to have any amount of control over in the first place? There are some major concerns to think about here. Now, another issue raised was about consumer protections in the event of adverse events like system hacks or stolen funds from digital asset exchanges. The question was brought in regards to the hack on Coinbase earlier this year.
What happens today for a Coinbase customer in the event of a hack of Coinbase or a Coinbase wallet?
Haas's response highlights the use of cold storage as the primary way that Coinbase protects user accounts. And in a connected comment, Haas gave a recommendation to standardize how all exchanges identify users and manage storage to protect against huge financial losses. There was then a follow-up question about how the committee should view crypto. Should it be considered a security?
In your view, is additional guidance defining clear rules of the road for investors and market participants needed at this time?
What Haas outlines here is that it would be inaccurate to call cryptos securities, and that additional clarity is needed on how to define and regulate their use. We could see some distinctions emerge here between proof-of-work coins and proof-of-stake tokens. Now, for example, the SEC may be more inclined to view XRP as being more similar to a company's stock than it would Bitcoin or Ethereum. The test to determine if an asset is in fact a security is called the Howey test, and one of the requirements of the Howey test is a promise of profit. And this can help you see the gray area here. A crypto like Bitcoin doesn't promise you any profits, but a crypto that pays its holders a portion of platform fees generated may have a strong case to be considered a security, which is okay. However, securities are far more regulated than currencies are. There was talk later in the session about developing a completely different set of guidelines separate from the Howey test to specifically determine if a crypto is a security, and this may be a good idea. This is completely new technology. Also, if you appreciate me watching through this 5-hour testimony, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It's free and you can always change your mind later. From here, Congresswoman Wagner asked Brooks of Bitfury about how the committee should proceed as to not stifle innovation in the developing crypto sector, to which he responds,
The answer is one word, it is parity. If we treat traditional financial assets in a certain way, we should not treat internet-based financial assets in a worse way. So for example, if you have a stablecoin that is functioning like a payment instrument, it should not be treated differently from a prepaid card or a traveler's check in the normal situation.
My interpretation of this is Brooks feels money is money. We should let the free market decide how to transfer value, so long as it's safe for the consumer, of course. Then we have a question about whether Paxos and Circle's stablecoin are backed by cash reserves.
Yes, I can confirm that 100% of the reserves that back USDC are held in cash and short-duration U.S. Treasuries.
Mr. Cascarilla?
I can confirm that as well.
They then go into Tether and how the New York Attorney General's investigation found that they did not have completely adequate reserves at Tether. She asked whether there should be federal supervision and whether laws should be passed to mandate that stablecoins' cash reserves are reported regularly. Both CEOs again agreed. I think that this is massively important. Tether is simply too big to move around unchecked, and I believe it should be mandated that any stablecoin or crypto with a reserve asset should have regular audit requirements, simply to protect people and give more clarity. Luckily, many stablecoins do this already, like USDC's monthly audit reports, which anyone can view online. Next, we have a question you might find interesting. Where is crypto headed? To which Haas responds,
This is the Internet of Value that we're talking about with Web 3.0. So the early things that we're talking about are the protocol layer. Over the protocol layer, we see infrastructure being built, and then we see applications being built as the next layer. Gaming platforms, so video games that many of you may play, your children may play. We've had early conversations with real estate developers to get broader global liquidity, more liquid markets for tokens. We've seen a lot of innovation in the payment space, but this is just the tip. And I think just like back in the early 90s when we were thinking about the internet and we couldn't envision Uber, we don't know what the future is, and there's so much ahead of us.
It's a great point that we really don't know where the future is headed, and it's kind of exciting. You can picture all of the awesome potential use cases for tokenized assets, like a tokenized car title or deed to your house. But we need systems in place and trust in place for these things to work long term. From here, I just thought it was interesting to show how fragmented and unorganized regulations are right now for crypto and crypto exchanges. The founder of FTX was asked which licenses they hold at their exchange.
In addition to a bunch of international licenses, in the United States, we are participating in that system you referenced with the money transmitter and money service businesses licenses. In addition to that, however, we are also licensed by the CFTC. We have a DCO, a DCM, and other licensure.
As you can see, some major cleaning up is needed in this space. Then we have a line of questioning on issues within the recent infrastructure bill. A problem in this bill is the loose definition of crypto broker. Under current laws, this would require DeFi operators, stake pool operators like myself, and many other services to report user data to the IRS. We have this question.
Do you think this is a good tax policy to require non-brokers to report on transaction for people who are not even their customer? Why or why not?
Brooks then had an excellent response.
There is no company involved in the transactions at all, and there's no one well situated to provide that kind of tax reporting. So that distinction is, I think, super clear. The technology has enabled people to transact peer-to-peer with no intermediary. So who is it that we're asking to do the tax reporting in that context?
We then have a question about how stablecoins could cause financial instability.
So how do you respond to the assertion by the president's working group that a run on stablecoins could cause systemic instability?
The response to this highlights the need for a distinction between types of stablecoins.
The key point here is to define stablecoin. Depending on how you define it, it creates different risks. If a stablecoin is backed by only cash and cash equivalents, there is no risk of a run. Of course, you could decide to back your stablecoin with other assets, and certain issuers do. It could be loans, it could be CDs, it also could be other types of securities.
This is a great point to consider in something that I've mentioned in the past. Not all stablecoins are created equal. If your stablecoin is one-to-one backed with cash, it should be looked at as cash. If it's backed by something else, it should be kind of looked at as something else, like a collateralized note of some kind. The second version isn't necessarily bad, however, there is more risk. You should consider this risk in any stablecoin lending or holdings that you partake in. Finally, we have a question about the stability of our financial system as a whole.
Do we see warning signs of a bubble in this marketplace?
And Brooks had an excellent answer to this as well.
I'll just give you a very quick anecdote. When I was practicing law, I represented one of the largest mutual fund complexes in the United States, and in their market room, they had a chart showing the U.S. equity market from 1792 to the present. What I remember about this room is it was a full city block long, and if you stood at the end of the room and looked at that chart, it was a straight line up and to the right. But if you walked right up close to the chart, you could very clearly see the Civil War and the Panic of 1907 and the Great Depression and all kinds of other volatility along the way. What I would tell you is, in the beginning of a fundamental technological revolution like this, the early days are going to see turbulence, but the long chart of crypto in only its 11-year history is up and to the right, just like the U.S. equity market. So what I would say is there are risks, there's disclosures that ought to be had, there's framework regulations should be adopted, but the fact that the price goes up and down doesn't make it any different from U.S. equity markets in the first 100 years of the country's existence.
I have to say, I'm thankful for someone like Brooks to be here to communicate cryptos in a very understandable manner. He honestly did a fantastic job in this testimony, and we have to applaud him. And really, this testimony in general made me feel more confident with regulators. Well, some of them. We seem to at least be headed in the right direction. But from here, we wait. We will not have clear guidance on these things in a month. We might not even have clear guidance in a year from now. But either way, guidance will eventually come, and this is an exciting time to be in this space. There's so many opportunities because it is simply so new. And if you're crypto savvy enough to make it to the end of this video, you're probably savvy enough to be interested in a crypto retirement account. I've just partnered with iTrust Capital, who allows you to place major cryptos in a retirement account, which is amazing because that means you can trade with no capital gains on these cryptos. If you're interested, I'll have them linked in the description, and if you end up opening an account, they'll actually give you $100 in free Bitcoin as well. If you're interested in learning more, I'll have a video on screen here that you can click to fully understand how these accounts work. I would like to thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.